One, two. Testing, testing. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Are we writing code this morning? What's going on? How is everyone this morning? Are you guys excited? I know I'm very short, so let me climb here so you can see me. All right. Can you all see me now? Why is everywhere so cold? What's going on? I mean, this is getting to the second week of August. I'm sure we have been paid. What's going on? Right? If you are working for a company that has not paid you till now, please come and see me. I know you guys know how to get your employers to pay you, right? I don't know for the designers here, Sha, but for the developers, you know how to get your employer to pay you. Am I right? Am I right? I mean, come on, you cannot be building software and you don't have a back door to it. Am I communicating to someone here? I mean, I'm sure. I hope this is not recorded, Sha. Just in case my employers are watching. All right. So this is the first day of Concatenate Conf. Now, I have no idea how that name came about. I might have to call CodeBeast to come and explain why they came up with Concatenate. But as developers here, I'm sure you understand, or you already have a reason why they came up with that name. And CodeBeast and his team, CodeBeast, Sarah Drasner is a senior developer advocate at Microsoft. Brian is also a developer advocate at, a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. They came together to come up with this conference. And, you know, Christian is the center of this conference, actually. That's the reason why they came up with this. He has suffered so much in the hands of immigration. I've been kind of lucky, but he has not been lucky. He has suffered too much. In fact, I have cried with him together in a room. Because he keeps applying, and then you print out all the documents. When you even prove that you exist as a human being, but nobody cares. So, but when we have a conference that everyone can participate in, where you don't need to leave your home. You can be in Lagos here, and then you have speakers from all over the world speak to you. That's amazing. And that's what Concatenate aims to bring. And this is the first edition of Concatenate. And moving forward, we plan to have Concatenate next year too. But next year will be awesome because instead of speakers coming in remotely, they'll be here physically. And then we plan to, you guys should give us a round of applause. I mean. All right. And then we also plan to, extend this to other African countries. So maybe, who knows, maybe in 2020, the next one will be in Rwanda. It could be in Nairobi. It can be in Uganda. It can be in Seychelles. Who knows? I mean. All right. So our first speaker is actually meant to start speaking at 10 o'clock. And then it's just 1 minute to that time. So I hope, is she online yet? Not yet. All right. So this is the point where I try to make you guys excited and happy. But right now, I don't know what to say. We are still waiting for the speaker to come. But at this point, all I need to tell you is that there are amazing giveaways. If you remember when we did for loop in this same location last year, right? If you remember, if you were here for for loop, you can remember the number of things you went away with and how exciting the whole process was. So this time around, we have times 10 more of those things we gave out last time. In fact, I have a spreadsheet here with all the gifts, and they assign my name to everything. Say, Prosper, give it to anyone you deem fit. Just make up your mind. So I've been giving full access. So if I just look at you and I like your face, I just give you. If you impress me, if you are smiling throughout, I give you. If you are attentive, I give you. Because I know we have so many laptops open now. I like the fact that we have so many laptops open because you can take notes, you can do stuff, but by the side, people are actually pulling tickets from Jira and completing their feature requests for the day instead of listening to the presentations. So let's do it. Okay. All right. So our first speaker is Simona Cotton. And she's also a she's an Azure developer advocate at Microsoft. And I call her the serverless queen because she talks a lot about serverless functions and Azure. So she's going to be talking to us. Oh, she's here already. She's smiling. Oh, my God. That's a great smile. Thank you, Simona, for agreeing to be a speaker. I think I'll just hand it over to you. So I'm sure you can see the audience. They are really excited. And Kristen, you ready? So she can take over now. Also a she's an Azure developer advocate at Microsoft. And I call her the serverless queen because she talks a lot about serverless functions. Hey, Simona, you can go on.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, awesome. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm super honored to be here. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And before I get started, I actually want you all to give like a huge, amazing round of applause to Christian and Sarah and Brian and Prosper and everyone on the team that has put this together. Yeah? Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Cool. So today we're going to look into building Node.js APIs using serverless. And before we get started, I want you to think for a second about Twitter. And think about Twitter in terms of scale. So Twitter right now has 330 million users. We together, collectively, we create 6,000 tweets per second. And also sums up to 350K tweets per minute, and that's 200 billion tweets per year. That's us, that's all of us. So now think about what would happen if the creator of Twitter would have thought when they created Twitter, would have thought of this entire scale that they need to cover. What if they froze and they never created Twitter at all? That's basically me on every single startup idea that I have. I stumble and I go and think about this idea that I have and how to scale it and what servers to use and what programming languages to use and how much do I need to scale. And then I never actually end up doing anything. And that's why I absolutely love serverless, because it allows me to implement the next Twitter. It allows me to do that without thinking of how I need to scale things. And in this presentation, we're going to cover things like, I used to know how to create an application using a traditional backend, a traditional API, like an Express API. And we're going to look into how we can do that using serverless. My name is Simona Cotin. I wish I was the serverless queen. Probably I'm gonna buy that domain or something. I work as a developer advocate at Microsoft. And if you have any questions related to Angular or Azure or JavaScript in general, do reach out on Twitter at Simona_Cotin. I'm super happy to chat with all of you. Just so we're on the same page, what serverless applications are, they're basically applications that significantly depend on third-party services, things like Auth0 or Active Directory, or any other application that you can think of that can offer you data, and you don't have to work for it. And then another part of serverless is custom code, which is also known as function as a service. And this is the code that is absolutely specific to your business value, to your business application, and nobody else can provide it. So serverless is third-party services and custom code. And when we're writing serverless code, we're basically writing code that reacts to events. So we react to events like HTTP requests, or a message has been uploaded to a queue, or a blob has been uploaded to a blob storage, a file, and we run code in reaction to that event. We also write code that auto-scales out of the box. The cloud provider takes care of that for us. Depending on the number of requests that we have incoming, it will spin up a different number of containers. And one of the most important things as well is the fact that you pay as you go. So there's no, you don't pay for idle time. And according to some studies in the past, basically most of the times we use only 20% of the CPU or of the resources that we have in a platform as a service environment. So for that reason, using serverless and paying as you go, that means that the cost of a new application is going to drop like this. Bustle is a good use case for paying as you go. And today we're going to focus on Azure as Azure functions. And the way I structured this talk is basically a series of I don't knows, because serverless is a new paradigm, and we want to make sure that when we're moving, even if we're seasoned developers, when we're moving from a traditional background to serverless, we want to make sure that we know where to look for things and how to get started. So some of the questions that we want to answer are things like, how do I create a project? Which are the tools that are available for me, and where do I get them from? How do I debug and run locally? Because when we build systems for productions and we work in a team, in a large team, we want to be sure that we can first, things work on our machine and then we push them to the cloud. Also, how do I install NPM packages? I know this is a simple question, but I had to Google that when I started using serverless. How do I connect to a MongoDB instance? That's very important, because serverless is this tiny thing. Function as a service is this tiny thing that's connected to third-party services, tons of them, and we need to make sure that we know how to connect to them. Also, where do I save my environment variables? Because I'm connecting to these services and I need to share some secrets. Normally we store them in environment variables. How do I save them in my local, but also in the cloud? How do I configure REST-like URLs? We're looking at an API, a REST API. Probably GraphQL would work differently, but in a REST environment, most of the times we want to use a certain URL pattern. So how do we do that using serverless? And how do I deploy it to the cloud? I've written all this amazing code. It runs in my local. I can debug it. It's connecting to third-party services. Everything's perfect, but it's not perfect if the only person that can use it is me, right? I want to be able to deploy it to the cloud, and people can start using my stuff. So what are we concatenating? Or what are we building? What's the application that we're going to look at? Well, we have this Angular application that lists puppies, and you can also create puppy. Bim is one of Sarah's puppies, and we want to be able to create an API that works like a CRUD type of API. And this Angular application is connected to an Express backend, and the final goal is to cut that Express backend and use serverless to create those endpoints for the operations that we need, like read or update or delete. Hope that makes sense. From here, we're going to go ahead and answer the first question. How do I create a project? And if you've tried serverless in the past, maybe a couple of years ago, probably you already know that the tooling wasn't great back then. Most of the things that you could do with serverless is go into the browser and create a new function in the browser, run it there, and that was the only thing that you could do. Nowadays, we can also use some of our own tooling. So things like on your left, you will see the icon of VS Code. VS Code has an extension for Azure Functions, and that's probably the best thing that has ever happened to serverless. You can use VS Code and the Azure Functions extension to create functions in your local. In the middle, you see the icon for a browser, so you can still use the browser to code your function, to test your function, and to have it deployed to the cloud. And then to your right, you can see the Azure Functions logo, which comes from the CLI. So if you're a CLI type of person, you can use the command line interface to create new functions and deploy them to the cloud. So there's all these new options that help us as developers to work in this new serverless environment. Okay, so I've pre-recorded a lot of stuff that I want to show you today, just to make sure that if we stumble somewhere, we can pick up easily. But now I'm going to go ahead in my IDE and show you the real thing. Okay, so this is it. I'm gonna create a new folder, and let's say this is 8th time I'm doing this, and I'm gonna open code. And while this is happening, so this is code for those of you who haven't seen it, and I'm using Sarah Drasner's Night Owl theme. It's beautiful. You should give it a try. And as you can see here, I have different icons. That this is for our Explorer. This is for debugging, and this is our Azure extension. And here you can see that I have app service. I have an extension for connecting to app service, to functions, to storage, and to Cosmos DB. And I'm already connected using my email address to Azure. So now I can expand the Azure Functions extension. And here you can see that it's using my subscription to connect to that, to Azure. And we have 4 different icons. The first one is to create, is an icon that we can use to create a new function and a new function project. So in order to group multiple functions, we have this concept of a function app, which is like a project. And then the second icon that we have here is to create a function. And this is to deploy our function app to the cloud. So let's go ahead and create a new project. It's going to ask me the folder that I want to use. And because I misspelled it, we're going to see that over and over again. So this is, I've chosen my current folder. And then it's going to ask me for the language for my project. And I have options like JavaScript, C#, and Java. And these are the 3 languages that are supported in my local on my Mac. There's others that are experimental at the moment. So I'm going to choose JavaScript. And what this has done for us, it's created a couple of files, and this folder, VS Code, which contains all the configuration for debugging and running my project in the local, and then a git ignore file, which defines the traditional git ignore files, but also it ignores the local.settings.json file, which is a file where we're going to store our secrets. And then in host.json file, this is where we're configuring global settings for our projects. Things like a function normally times out after 5 minutes, but here we can override that and we can add a property in this object and in this file and update it to 10 minutes, which is great. We can do that for all the functions that we're gonna have in the entire project. So now this is our project, and I need to create a new function. And remember, we were talking about different types of events that we can listen to. Well, this is an easy way to generate new code for those events. So we can listen to HTTP requests, or we can listen to blob triggers, to blob events, to queue events, and timer trigger. We can create a function that has a timer trigger, and this is what we would call the cron job. But because we're creating an API, we're going to look at the HTTP trigger. And I'm going to name this get puppies. And there's different authorization levels. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to use anonymous, which means that everyone who has this URL can actually call the function. Function will generate a token for us that will restrict the API to be called only when we're including that token in the URL. But we're going to go with anonymous. And now I'm going to move back to the Explorer. And as you can see, we have this new folder that has the same name as our function. And in this folder, we have 3 new files. So function.json is a file where we define the configuration for our function. And here, it's a JSON object where you will see some of the options that we've selected before. Things like, what's the authentication level? It's anonymous. What type of function are we creating? Or what type of events are we listening to and the runtime will listen to? That's an HTTP trigger. Is this an input? Are we listening to requests that are coming in? Yes, this is. And the object that we're using is request, and we're listening to methods like get or post. And then the output is still of type HTTP, and this is an output object, and the name is REST. So now I can go ahead and see the other file that has been created for us, and this is the index.js file, and this is where our code lives. Obviously, we can create other types of files where we put our shared code into, but this is our entry point for our function. And this is a function that gets 2 parameters. The first one is context, and context is an object that we use to communicate between the runtime of the function and our code. So we can do things like log information, or we can set the request, or we can the response, or we can get the request. We can get the list of bindings from the context object. And then the request here is basically the first input binding that we've seen in the function.json file. And we can see in this function that we're basically waiting for a name parameter to be defined in the request. And if that's the case, we're gonna reply with hello. And if that's not the case, we're just gonna we're gonna return an error and just say that this is not okay. So I'm gonna run this, and this will start our function runtime. This is the logo of Azure Functions. And this will also give us a link to the function's URL. And hopefully this will work. Maybe, let me see if I have some other instances running. Yes. I'm gonna close this. So now if I go back and restart, It should work. Okay, here we are. So this is the URL that I can use for my function. And the first thing that we're going to see is that we actually need to pass in a name or as a parameter. So I'm going to use concatenate, and this is going to say hello concatenate. And in order to debug this function, I'm going to go ahead and add a breakpoint here on line 4, and once I refresh this browser page, it's going to go back to my code, and it's going to allow me to inspect variables here, maybe change them. So we have exactly the same type of environment that we have normally in a development experience in any other type of traditional backend. So this is it. This is our hello world in just a couple of minutes. We can go ahead now and instead of looking at a hello world type of application, we can go ahead and create a function that will read data from a database. And the first thing that we need to do here that we're gonna see in our code, so I haven't written all this code in like 1 second. I've actually used a VS Code snippet. And you can see on the first line that I'm using this MongoDB package to connect to a database. And if you remember, the first thing that we had on our list was to know how to install npm packages. So I'm going to go to my terminal and I'm going to run npm init. I'm not sure if you know about this option -y, but what this does is it allows us to generate a package.json file with all the default variables. And now I'm going to install MongoDB. And if I go to the file explorer, you can see that I have this new package.json file here that depends on the MongoDB package. And I also have a node modules folder, which is going to be shared by all our functions that we create here. So awesome, we've answered the question, how do we install npm packages? It's nothing new for anyone, but I think that's great news because we're using the same things that we are used to using. The next thing that we have here in our code is an authentication object that contains a user and the password. And then we have an object, we initialize a client object to null. And then we have our function that we've seen earlier, where we basically check whether our client exists. And if it doesn't, we're going to connect to our MongoDB database. And then we're going to use the authentication object. And once that's successful, we're going to assign the connection to our client and execute a query. If we have any exception, we're going to log that. And if our client exists, we're going to skip the connection step, and we're just going to go ahead and query. And in this query, we are connecting to an admin database using the puppies collection and retrieving all the items in that collection. And then we are setting the response of our function to that particular object. So now, if we run our application, we should retrieve data from our database. So our database is a Cosmos DB database, which you can see here, where I have only 2 items. I'm going to go ahead and run this. So these are the items that we have in our database. We have Vim, and we have sudo here. So if our function has started, which it has, now if I refresh this page where we're running our function, we should be able to retrieve those 2 items. And that's happened. Awesome. Yeah, so we have 2 puppies. We have written our first function that uses MongoDB, connects to Cosmos DB, and retrieves all the items from there. But there's one thing that's not great here. I'm sure that some of you in the audience that are concerned with security, when you saw this, you either thought that, oh, let's connect to Simona's account, or that's really not great. And if we were to check in this code into GitHub, then we would check in our secrets and everyone else could use this. So probably we want to move them in a file that's ignored by GitHub, and we can, we can do that, right? And I've already hinted at which is that file. Anyone in the audience knows? Yeah? Well, it's this local.settings.json file. And I've prepared a helper file here where I can just copy paste my, my values so that we don't spend time with me typing stuff. As you can see here, I have a URL that allows me to connect to the database, a user, and the password, exactly what we're using here as well. And the way I can access values from that file, well, this is going to be very familiar as well for those of you who's writing node code. Basically, it's process.env.user, because that's the name of the variable that I want to use, and then my password is going to be process.env.pass, and here we're going to use URL. So I've just changed index.js to use local environment variables, and then I've defined them in my local settings.json, and because the runtime is not listening to changes on local.settings.json, I'm going to restart the function. And in theory, now I've just moved variables from one place to another, so our function should work just as expected. So I'm refreshing the page, it's loading, and ta-da! It works just like before, which is great news, even though it's boring. Okay, so now the next question that we had on our list was, how do I actually define a route that's specific, how do I customize a route? And I can do that in function.json, which, remember, it's a configuration file for our function. I can add this property called route, and I can say that I want to listen to a URL that ends with puppies. And now, because I've just modified the function.json file, in theory, this should work. But obviously, I'm using the previous URL. So I should change this to puppies. And ta-da! We have our data available at the new URL, which includes puppies, and API is configured by default in our function. So the last thing that I want to show you is how we can deploy our function to the cloud. So we've defined all these things, and now we want to deploy them to the cloud. And I'm going to go back to the extension that we've seen earlier, and I want to deploy this to our function app using the current folder. And I've created this function app in the cloud before so that we don't spend time doing that now. And I've selected the function app, and it's going to ask me if I want to override the code. And already I bet that some of you are thinking, what do you mean by overriding? Does this mean that I'm going to be able to override people's work? The answer is yes, which is not fantastic, but this is just for development. In reality, we can actually set up a VSTS process. We can set up CI/CD pipelines with functions where basically I can deploy my code to GitHub. I can push changes to GitHub and trigger a CI/CD process where my tests will run, my code will be built if I'm using a language that needs that, and then it will be pushed to the cloud. But just for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to show you how you can do it when you're deploying by yourself. And here we can also check the logs for what's happening in our functions. And normally with this deploy to function app functionality, we are zipping up all the code that we've written, also the node modules that have been installed, and pushing them to the cloud. And this is for just to make it fast. So it looks like it has completed view logs. It's going to take me to that page, and it's also going to give me the URL of the function. As you can see, we have a small bug now where we're calling get puppies instead of puppies. And this is our function, which has been deployed in the cloud. And for this function, we can also watch metrics like the number of incoming requests, how much did it take? Did we have any failures? What are the logs that we're seeing, and how many servers we have online at this time with our function? And as you can see, it's taking quite a while, and it doesn't work. And one of the reasons why it doesn't work, actually the only reason why it doesn't work, is because we have defined our secrets and our connection string to MongoDB in our local, but we haven't done that in the cloud. And we can do that easily in the same extension that we've seen earlier. I can expand this, and we have this application setting, which I can now use to upload my local settings. And it's going to ask me what file do I want to use. I don't want to overwrite it. And this is going to upload the settings that I've defined earlier. So now if I refresh the page, it's going to restart the application. Awesome. So I'm going to skip all these. I think I ran out of time. I'm going to skip through the question. I have a message here saying, yeah, my time is up. Thank you so much. I have a list of resources, which I'm going to share with you on Slack. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simona.
Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Okay.
Questions?
Hello. My name is Toby. When I was looking at the file for the serverless, can I specify the version of Node I want to run, or it should just picks anyone for me?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Can you specify what?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
The question is, can you specify the version of Node that it needs to run at runtime?
So because the servers are being managed by the provider will be the one that will list the versions of Node that you can use. So currently, we are running Azure Functions on version 10, and we also support 8. We can do that with a application setting, but you won't be able to use whatever version you want. You will be able to use only the versions that the cloud provider has available.
Okay, so are there future plans to be able to use a specific version you want to use?
So you can choose between the versions that are supported only by the cloud provider, and maybe you can use containers, but that means that you don't have the managed servers that you normally want to have in serverless. Oh, my screen is not shared anymore, but there's an application setting, website no default version, and you can set that one to the Node version that you want to use.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Simona.
No problem. Happy. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.
What?
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Simona. Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. That was a great presentation. I hope you guys learned a lot from her concerning serverless functions on Azure. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. I call it Azure, I don't know, call it different names. All right. So initially, I forgot to mention that you need to tweet about the conference, and then the hashtag is Concatenate Conf. Hashtag Concatenate Conf. Please tweet. And then, of course, there's a gift for the person with the most tweets. I don't know. If your tweet can outnumber the number of tweets I have, then you get a gift. The Wi-Fi. Is there a Wi-Fi? Is there a Wi-Fi? I'm not sure. Wi-Fi. Wait. Eh? We want this light. How will you see this? Your slide. Your slide. All right. Okay. So our next speaker will not be remote. Is someone you know. Um, I don't know. He does so many things, which is typical of developers these days. But his own is very extraordinary. Um, he works for Scotch.io, and then also is a partnership associate at Andela, runs the Andela Learning Community, and then also is an open source contributor at Gatsby. Just one person, these three things. And right now, he's going to speak to us about static sites. And the title of his presentation is Static Sites on Steroids. Please help me welcome William Imo. I don't think you need to climb yet, so.
Hello, hello. My people. Wow. I think, first of all, you guys should give yourselves a round of applause for yourselves. Not for me, for yourselves. Like, you can do better, I mean. Ooh, okay. So, I think I'd like to start with a story. I wish everyone was here, right? But I remember the first time I started writing code. I came in contact with code. First time was around 2011. I actually stopped. I started with Code Beast, right? We were in the same school, same faculty. One thing put me off, right? It was actually div tags, opening and closing div tags. I was like, why do I always have to put shift, open, shift, close? That was really crazy. And then not just that, I started thinking about, okay, you're done with this. You always have to go to Dreamweaver to refresh. Or you go to your browser to see whichever thing you've changed. How many of you use Dreamweaver here? The OGs. Yeah, so it was really, really crazy. And then I was like, why am I even doing this thing? And at the end of the day, you build a website, it looks really shitty. And you're like, I can't be doing this in my life, man. I think I'd rather study chemical engineering. And that's what I did. But then Code Beast continued. Yeah, so can you, I'd like to put the slides here. Time. Okay, starting from the beginning, title of my talk is Static Sites on Steroids. You all know what steroids are, right? I know you guys don't do drugs, but you should know what steroids are. So basically, my name is William Imo. Some of you know me as Chulo. You can find me on, I don't know who owns that account, but if you send a message there, I'd be sure to respond on Twitter. Just a quick one. This isn't going to run like a normal session. We're basically going to be having conversations, right? And it's going to be in such a way that there's supposed to be questions at the end, but we'll be having... What? Let's just go with what we have here, please. This is fine, yeah? Okay, yeah, so just save your questions for the end. There isn't so much time. We're going to be having like a question and answer session at about 20 minutes from now. I'd be glad to hear them all. You could just do myself and yourself a favor. Go to Twitter, tweet at Gatsby.js, tweet at iChulo, use the caption the hashtag Concatenate Conf. I have 2 t-shirts, custom Gatsby t-shirts to give out to like those with the most tweets. I don't know if Prosper's promise, but that's like mine. Did you guys get that? Okay, cool. Yeah, so just one fun fact before we proceed. So there's this saying that page visits, or the time it takes a page to load, actually translates to money, right? So it's noticed that over 50% of visitors drop off when it takes over 2 seconds to load your site. So like I said, in the earlier times, it was with Dreamweaver, you have like pages take a good number of seconds to load. But right now, everyone is in a hurry, right? You wouldn't want to load a page or even a link, click on a link, and then it takes you 5-10 seconds. You just drop off, and then you look for something else. You have better things to do. So it wouldn't be crazy as a product owner to have people leave your website, say, once they click on, right? It wouldn't make sense at all. So basically, I'd give you guys a short history of how it all started, starting from the Dreamweaver period, or I think there was a time before that where people used Notepad. People like Prosper, Temoyewa, they used Notepad. So before then, we'd write code with HTML, CSS, possibly you throw in some jQuery. If you know how to write JavaScript, you're a chairman, you put that in, right? But then the sites, they come out really shabby. You use Internet Explorer, it frustrates your life to even start with, right? Things are not going so well. There isn't so much interactivity on the website. But then, who cares? You just serve it out like that. But then we moved a step further. We started talking about server-side rendering. We started using technologies like PHP, right? And even Node. You serve your files from the server. But then that came with its own consequences, right? This time around, you're going to be shipping large files to your server. And if you're a DevOps person here, I think Mary Mazi, she does DevOps, you know that costs a lot of money, right? Server space directly translates to money. So that wasn't scalable. And then we moved on to the shiny period, right? Where we started talking about JavaScript frameworks like React, Angular, which required us to just we could build full stack applications, or we could build complete applications on the front end, right? And then deploy. All was going well, but then you're sending in tons and tons of JavaScript to the front end. It takes crazy time to load, right? But then as developers, you know you're not just writing code, you're also thinking about optimization. You're thinking about how to make things better for people, right? At the same time, you're thinking about how to save cost. So now we are in the present, right? There is the Jamstack. So what's basically the Jamstack? It's just JavaScript, APIs, and markup. So when you look at everything you do, you can easily split them into 3 things, right? You have the JavaScript that handles the front end, you have the APIs that handle like the back end, and then you have the markup where you send in like your text. Basically, you spend long hours writing HTML, right? But how about we simplify these things? How about we condense these things into 3 different components, right? Not like the components, which you work with, but 3 distinct, I call them areas. So that's how the Jamstack was born. So basically, the Jamstack just allows you write JavaScript. It could be vanilla JS, it could be any JavaScript, it could be JavaScript from anywhere, right? But as long as it's JavaScript. You have APIs. APIs could be serverless, they could be third-party services. Simona talked about serverless architecture. You could use that. But then APIs from anywhere, right? And then you pass in markup. And markup can be HTML, it can be Markdown, any way you feel comfortable writing it. You could even pass in data from Excel. You can pass in data from WordPress. You could write something on the sheet of paper. I don't know if that will pass, but you can try. Yeah, so basically, that's what the Jamstack is all about. And what are like the basic features of the Jamstack? How do you recognize the Jamstack when you see it, right? First of all, it is secure, right? Because there isn't any server per se, right? You're just writing JavaScript on the front end. You're connecting to a third-party service. It could be a CMS. It could be just any back end your friend might have built. Hopefully, it is secure. He's sure it's secure. He gives it to you. Then you could use it to build like whichever awesome stuff you're building. And then you're very sure it's going to be fast, Why is it going to be fast? Because you've removed a lot of the abstractions. You've sent the backend to one side. The markup is coming maybe as markdown, so that's like really cheap. So it just has to be fast. And now, one thing again is the cost is reduced. We talked about servers having, like, you get to spend so much money to host your servers. But this time around, you don't spend as much because you could just deploy to a CDN. Hope my village people aren't calling me now. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so you don't spend so much money, you just push to a CDN, and then basically that's just all. The size is really, really low, and the data handling is awesome. And why I say the data handling is awesome, because like I said, someone can write something on a sheet of paper, you convert it to JSON data, it could be in Excel, or just any form of data. As long as you can transform this data, it works, it goes, right? So then comes I call this the chairman, Great Gatsby. Because we found out that as time goes on, we keep on developing, we keep on optimizing our processes. New tools and technologies come up. Sometimes we get confused. Some people even lose their way and go into design. They're tired of JavaScript. They cannot come and kill themselves. Yeah, so then came Gatsby. So what's Gatsby? Gatsby is simply a static site generator which uses React components. And as you know, React helps you build in interactivity to your application.